Or-
Good morning and welcome to today's program. I'm Katie White. I work in the Outreach and Interpretation Department. Today's program is titled Capitol Views, Jorud's Earliest Photographs, and our presenter is Jeff Malcomson. Jeff Malcomson has been a public historian for 25 years in Colorado, Arizona, and Montana, working as an archivist specializing in government records and photographs. He is currently the photograph archives manager at the Montana Historical Society in Helena, Montana, where he has worked since 2005. Jeff earned a master's degree in history from Colorado State University, where he studied public history and the history of the American West. Please make sure your cell phones are silenced and enjoy the program. And please welcome Jeff. Thanks.
Okay. As I said earlier, thanks for coming out. For the folks that are here and for anybody watching from home, glad you're tuning in or get to watch this. So I put together a lot of photos. So this is kind of, in many ways, just a fun slideshow of looking at old photos. But I want to try to make it a little bit more thoughtful, if we can, and have you think about, what these photos mean and how you relate to the place that you live, how we all relate to Helena or wherever you live. And kind of talk about, I just want to bring up the idea of a sense of place and how, in particular, a photograph collection such as Leslie Jorud's that we'll look at can give us a sense of place and a sense of time together. And there's, you can look into that idea of a sense of place, and I've read about it a little bit recently again. There's a scholar named John B. Jackson who basically did a lot of landscape studies. He was kind of a pioneer in the area of landscape studies and talked about sense of place a lot. And he talked about it as something that has kind of developed over time through, he brought up the idea of through ritual, recurrence of visiting a place or different places, and just that over time you develop an affinity, a sense of place. There's a lot more to it. I'm not going to be able to, that's not really a topic of this presentation, but I wanted to bring it up at the beginning just to kind of make you think about that, and perhaps look into maybe even read a little bit of John B. Jackson, if you can find his books and stuff, essays out there. When it comes, I'll try to bring it up whenever I can as we're looking at things. But you think of Les Jorud, and let's just get into him. So this is a series I'm going to do a series. This is the first one, I guess. I did a presentation on Jorud in total, kind of his whole photograph collection back in 2019 at the history conference, the Montana History Conference. So September 2019, as we were finishing up the processing of his massive photograph collection. And it's somewhere around 75,000 photographs. It's the largest single photographer photograph collection that we have, and maybe the largest single photographer collection in the state, possibly. So it's very huge. We were just finishing up going through all the photos, preserving them and trying to organize them a bit and describe them so we can get better access to the collection. So that's what that presentation was about, is about kind of the whole collection as a whole. So I'm not going to talk too much about the whole collection. There's all kinds of components to it. Different groups of photographs of weddings, photographs or portraits of individuals and families. It's the mass of his commercial photography work from about the 1910s through the 1960s. And he was here in Helena that whole time and took many, many photos. So this is going to be more focused on his early life, really his childhood and his beginning in photography. And so, his collection is largely based on he saved it throughout his life. It's almost all of his work for his whole lifetime, more or less. So this material, in the early days, he wasn't a commercial photographer, of course, when he was a teenager. And these are mostly taken when he was a teenager. These weren't like saved in a special spot, like these are my early photos. They were just actually a lot of them, I'm not sure. I think they were just mixed in with a lot of the street scenes and sort of general photography that he did around town. So usually his collection was organized by the job that he did, whoever he was working for, and it was filed under a company or a person or a business organization, whatever it was he was doing the work for. So this material was not like that. I didn't know actually what it was when I came across it. I'm like, wow, these are really tiny, and I'll show you them in a few minutes. Really small, basically I think 2.5 by 4 inch negatives, and basically contact prints from those. So very primitive printing, very primitive camera, not the best camera. But for his day, he was a kid. He was learning how to take pictures. So that's what we'll see. This is not going to be amazing photography, but I think it's really interesting and really cool to see. So, and of course, it shows Helena at a particular place and time. So a little bit about Jorud. His name's Leslie Henry Jorud, and he was born in Helena, of course, 1899, so right at the turn of the century. One of those, my daughter was born December 1999, just before the turn, and he's a similar child, so born into a new era in many ways. And he was born at a little house on Benton Avenue, which today would be just across from Carroll College, more or less. And his father was an immigrant. I think his mother was too, I'm not sure. I'd have to look back into that, but basically working class family. I think his father worked as a bartender and other odd jobs. So certainly not a lot of money in their household. So 8 years old, for whatever reason, he buys a pinhole camera, 35 cents. Which is probably a good sum for a little young guy to save up and start just taking fun photos, learning this new thing, which photography at that time, just after 1900, is becoming very popular among the masses of Americans. The Brownie, he buys a Brownie camera. Kodaks are selling like hotcakes. This is just a little $2 camera when he was 14 years old. So now he's getting serious, I guess. He's going to take some real pictures, finally. So it's not long after that he drops out of school. And I think he basically makes it through the 8th grade, like many people did at the time. And he's going to work. He's going to just work. And probably in many ways he might have had to, given his family background. So he's working as an errand boy at the drugstore, Parch and Drug in downtown Helena. And he also starts doing their film developing. Photography is becoming very popular, but people don't develop their own pictures. They take them to the drugstore, which, of course, we did throughout the 20th century, most of the time anyway. They're doing that right from the start. And he's learning to do that as an employee of the drugstore. So 1916, he gets a chance to work for a professional photographer here in Helena, Leslie Lyle, another Leslie, who's a photographer. I found something interesting when I was researching in the census, and found that Leslie Lyle had a younger brother who was the exact age of Les Jorud. So I suspect they're in school together. It's a small town. They're probably know each other pretty well. So likely there's a relationship there. Leslie Lyle is, I'm not sure how much older he is. I'm not more than 10 years probably older than Jorud. So he hires him the summer of 1916. Jorud kind of takes up Lyle's Kodak photo finishing business. So professional photographers, they often like to take photographs and maybe work in the darkroom and make prints and so on. Not necessarily like doing the photo finishing work for all kinds of people's snapshots or whatever. So that's the kind of work that you get. It's the grunt work. You give it to your assistant, and Jorud's about 16, 17 years old. At the time, he's a go-getter. He wants to take this on, so he kind of takes that on for Les Lyle. But he's also learning here. We see the photographs on the right. These are about that time period. He's got access to probably Lyle's camera, and working in Lyle's darkroom. So these are actual photos from that period. So it's kind of these are potentially, I think, taken at Lyle's studio. That's my guess. The photo in the middle on the right, because we see large format photographs. Those are probably Lyle photographs. You may be able to confirm that someday, but I believe it's Les Jorud. That's Les Jorud. They're hanging out with his friends and they're taking pictures of each other. These are I think they were in an album that we got donated. We had donated from somebody who grew up with Jorud, knew them. So very interesting to come across these photos and to have them give you a little insight into his life at the time. So as we go into the period that he's a teenager through the 1910s, Helena is experiencing, certainly from 1900 to 1910, Helena experiences a boom in population and economic, kind of recovers from the 1890s depression, the mid-1890s depression with the silver bust and everything that happened there. So Helena's coming back. The population is growing. Helena's population is about a little shy of 11,000 people in 1900. By 1910, it's up over 16% to 12,500. And then by 1920, it's down almost 4%. But there's a big boom in the state. So we know that the state population and probably Helena's population was growing tremendously through the 1910s, but then crashed with drought and the war. 1919 brought economic problems after the war and adjustments, and just the disruption of the war probably caused a lot of things to happen, people to move around. And so by 1920, the population is actually down. So it's been going up and then up a lot, and down. So it's very much a cyclical up and down process for Helena. It's kind of disrupting of the population, I'm sure. That's what they're kind of living through at this time. So we'll see that in some of the photos. We'll see that represented in just the newer buildings and developments of certain parts of town. So I want to give you that background, that context too. So Jorud, he's 17, 18 years old when World War I starts for the United States, when the U.S. enters the war in 1917. He probably wants to get in the war. I'm sure his parents probably held him back. But he actually, through serendipity, enlists in the Army at very beginning of November 1918. Of course, the war ends in November 11th, 1918. He joins November 4th, 1918. He joins the Tank Corps, which might tell you something about him if he had a choice in that matter. I'm not sure that he did, but he loved to ride motorcycles. He was probably interested in this new mechanical machine of war. So he's sent to North Carolina to train in the Tank Corps, and the war ends, of course. So it's kind of, he doesn't have to fight, but he does get the Army experience, and gets to go to faraway places. He comes back in 1919 and just gets right back into his life in Helena, and starts a photo processing business service out of the O'Connor's drugstore. And he does that for probably about 10 years or more, 10, 11 years, until he gets married in 1921 to a high school or a school sweetheart, somebody he knew certainly growing up, Emily Carlson. And they have a child after a couple of years. One child dies, they have another, so they have a couple children, but by 1930, that's when they open Jorud Photoshop, which is a big step for them, and is a staple of Helena, photography, and for decades. So that was until 1930. So this is all going to be, prior to 1920 that we're talking about here in these photographs, probably prior to him going into the service in 1918. So I want to show you real quick, jump over here. I want to give you an idea before we look at the photographs, many of the photographs themselves, what they really look like, how small they are. So you have an idea. They're going to be big on the screen and have kind of grainy, but that's because of the camera that he had, which I'm sure was very small. But these are the contact prints that we have, and pretty much how I identified them, and we know that they're from this period when he was shooting with this camera, whatever camera it was. I'm not really certain of the camera. Somebody who knows more about early 20th century cameras and photography could probably tell us. I haven't found that out yet, but someday I hopefully will. So speak up if you know. So these are the size of the prints. The negatives are just the same size, on nitrate film. Little guys, real small. And of course, only a few of them he labels them on the negatives. Puts some just really brief information. So some of them we don't know exactly when they are. Most of them I'm kind of guessing the date from 1915 to 1920. There's probably about less than 25% of them he actually put the date on the negative. And the rest of his life and throughout his business, Jorud was really good at putting dates on negatives. Almost every negative has a date, and even some specific information. So that's what we're looking at, and you see as they transfer to the big screen. I kind of want to run through. I pulled out as many as I could. I did this talk once before, about a month or so ago, for the first time, and so since then I added in a whole segment, 2 segments really. So you're getting a bonus here. You don't even know it, but there's whole groups of things that I just couldn't put in. We have a little bit more time today, and so I decided to put these in. Hopefully I'll still get through in the allotted time, but there's just some good stuff that I really like to add a whole nother series, but it's about 6 or 7 photos, and maybe someday if you're up in the photo archives, I'll show them to you, but I'll talk about them briefly. So we'll start with kind of some significant buildings that he took photos of. So this is one of the earliest ones. We have, I think, 2, maybe 3 or more, maybe 3 or 4, I don't know, photos that are dated 1915. There might be, some of them I've just dated circa 1915 to 1920 because I don't know when. They're probably somewhere in that time period. And it does seem throughout in his negatives, around early 1920s, he switches over to a little bit larger film size, so he got a different camera. It's a little bit better photographs, so he stopped using this small camera that he was using. So there is a change at some point around 1920, 21. So these are all before that, I'm sure. So of course this is Carroll College. Mount St. Charles College at the time, and he he was born just down the hill, down there, and he actually later on has his family home it's still on Lyndale, right, actually owned by Carroll College now. So he has a close tie. He actually, I think his family moved over to Harrison, a block or two over later, but that's kind of where he lived, on Benton over to Harrison. So I kind of want to start with this one because it's an early photo of his. He's probably 15 years old when he takes it, and it's iconic of his early, just taking these significant buildings. You got to start somewhere, right? This might have been an exciting one for him. Another early, it was December 1915 in winter. This is the backside of the Merchants Delivery warehouse or building, which was, I guess, an early Becca knows so much more about it. It was used by transportation companies, for like wagon storage, carriage storage, so on. Pretty far back in Helena, so in the 19th century. And apparently there was a fire. I haven't looked into it too much, but it looks like it's gutted. The back part of the building, it's just the stone left. But it's got fresh snow, substantial snowstorm. So a lot of these photos, and we'll notice, they're kind of along this corridor where he walked, I'm sure, from his house over around Benton by the college, walking into downtown. So he takes pictures along that. There's a whole series of photos of Getchell, which isn't a substantial street at all, especially at this time. But he took a bunch of pictures of the little wooden walkway along Getchell, and I think they're fascinating. But we just don't have photos of Getchell Street, but he took pictures as he was walking along and saw things. Of course, the U.S. Assay building over on Broadway, still there, thankfully, is an obvious target of a photographer. It's kind of an attractive building, and it definitely gets a better shot on the right, doesn't he? And of course, the jail is something everybody wants to take a picture of. It's a neat stone building too. And this is a neat one. I just like how he has his subjects, probably his friends or somebody standing down there with the car placed. Just helps to give it kind of a nice composition, and with the fence on the left, he just does a good job with it. Another photo of that's in 1917. So not sure of when the prior one was taken, but he takes again along his walking path probably, and I think it's possible, and maybe Becca could nod or something. Did he go to this church? He went to the first Christian church, so that's probably why he took it. But it does show up in other photos like this one, and also we'll see quite a few photos here of this part of town. He's walking through it daily, I'm sure, but also it's this part of town with the two parks, Hill Park and Women's Park, being developed about this time. I think it's 1915, 16. Let me jump back to the prior page here. So yeah, Women's Park is developed in 1916. We'll see that show up in some of the photos. We know they're after 1916. Hill Park is developing about the same time. Confederate Fountain is installed. I don't believe it's here in that photo. It should be, I don't think it's there. And it's installed in 1916 as well. And there are a few winter scenes, which is nice because we don't get a lot of winter photographs, believe it or not. Early on, I guess some photographers are you gotta stay out there for quite a while, and it's cold, and you gotta handle all the stuff, the equipment, carry it out there. You don't get a lot of winter photos early on. So I'm thankful for the ones that we do have from Jorud here. This is the Monticello Apartments. So about Warren and Broadway, between what is now Cruz and Warren, right in there. And this was the place where the early state legislature met. It was the Merchants Hotel in the 19th century. became apartments. And by this point, he actually worked in this building. So another one of his odd jobs. So around this time, he's probably working in this building when he took the photo, but documenting a really interesting, Helena building, and one that was torn down in the early 70s, of course. This is great, out at the Broadwater. We don't have photos, these early photos of the buildings of the Broadwater Hotel or anything else there, but he takes this and keeps it. I think it's really cool. It really speaks to kind of the time period for photography. It's kind of a romantic. There's people over in the shade in the right. There's a couple, some other people giving perspective. You can barely see the Broadwater Hotel building back behind the trees, but you get this great shot down the railway, and that's how people would have arrived right at the Broadwater Hotel. So I don't know what he's doing with this, but it's fascinating. I think it's cool, and I couldn't help but cropping it and to give you kind of a better sense of he was trapped in the either holding the camera like that or like this, and I think it would have been great if he had a zoom lens. He might have done this, but I think it's cool, isn't it? You can see the hotel a little bit better, the pergola back there, whatever, or a cupola. What is it? Yeah. All right, so back to the north side of town at this point. And this really is the north boundary of Helena. At Women's Park, Hill Park, really not developed much, just a little bit at this point. You see the street is, it's a dirt, it's a mess. This is March 1917, and this is the Great Northern Depot, of course. Unfortunately, damaged in the earthquakes, and then had to be torn down. They had to take down the tower, and then it was just kind of a sad building after that, and fortunately replaced in the future by the Federal Reserve building now. But so this was built about 1912 to 13, and this is so it's just been there a few years, and this part of town is really being developed and beautified at this point. So George's documenting it. This is a great angle. Again, probably his walk in the morning or whatever. Let's see, this is probably afternoon light. And he, he's taking pictures up, but it's a great view. I really, appreciate. This is where that sense of place idea comes in, where this is a teenager. He's been there his whole life. He's starting to take pictures through a camera. You see kind of what he's framing, what he's putting in the frame there. Got the cathedral, the high school back behind it, and I think it's a nice composition, nice view for a teenager. Not the greatest shot here, but again, trying to get that winter low light on the building to kind of emphasize it, and also getting the mountains in the background to give some depth to the photo. It's kind of an interesting shot. View of the Great Northern Depot. So here, we have Women's Park being developed, and is a beautiful park at its birth and at the beginning. You have the pergola there, and there's a fountain, and many shrubs, flowers put in, and it's a really nice park, and he's using it to kind of frame his views of that area. There's the fountain. I think, is that the sign? I think it says, don't pick the flowers or something. Stay off the grass. He's got a person in here walking. It's a nice addition. And I think in the background there is maybe the state nursery seed storage or something, or maybe is that the college back there? Is it? Okay, it's Carroll. Yeah, they haven't done the addition, I don't think yet, but anyway. Oh, there's the state nursery building back in the left there. So Confederate Fountain is there on the left. So Hill Park is getting developed. Trees are being planted, as we see, and the fountain is installed in 1916. So it gets another view up the church and Mount Helena. And again, cross over to the Steamboat Block, Neal Avenue. And there's that the Merchants Delivery building, which to look at it closer, but it looks like it's been cleaned up since the fire probably. But all right, here's getting into overviews. I mean, it doesn't have a whole lot of these from this time period, but just more broader views of town. This is a neat shot, though it's, the limits of his camera really, he can't get a really crisp photo that we would like, perhaps. But you do see the area he's trying to get a wide view of. Right in the center is Women's Park and Hill Park, rising up to the left. You see Carroll College off in the distance. So neat view of that time period when that part of town is really changing and developing. This is one of his earliest ones. I think it is the earliest that we have, dated-wise. It's dated July 1915 by him. Great view up Mount Helena and from one of the buildings there in downtown. And what is that? I guess that's Park Avenue down there. So really neat it's a good photo. It turned out well. This one I love. It's the negative is a little beat up, a little worse for the wear, but what a great idea this was in composition and just the scene, the winter scene again, which is rare. And he's got those iconic buildings in there. You got the steam, it's cold. It was probably a tough picture to get, but again, he's probably walking to downtown. So he's got a person in there. He gives some scale. I love it. I think I want to get Tom Ferris, our photographer, to clean this up and get it, make it as nice as we can make it with our modern technology. But it's a wonderful view. It's one of my favorites from 1917. Again, he's got a view of Mount Helena, and he kind of goes, he's out there on the north edge of town. So we see some of the, houses that are built kind of out there in the middle of nothing, or maybe kind of out there by themselves, the edge of the residential areas. Again, a neat view with a little bit of snow. And this is kind of, it didn't turn out great. The focus is probably off, but it's kind of a neat. It's a little tilted, but it's nice. It's kind of bucolic, or it's a rural scene close to town with the snow. This one again, he probably shook the camera or something as he was taking it, but just give you an idea of what he's taking. And we don't have too many of Mount Helena, so. But you can see how many trees are up there. It's just always a great thing to see, to date the trees. This is the section I added to this. They're just great photos of the fairgrounds. So from 1915 to probably 17, he seems to have just gone to the fair like everybody else. This is a wonderful shot of so basically Henderson Street, coming right into the front gate of the fairgrounds and the buildings that are there at the time. And seeing the Scratch Carl Hills in the background helps us to know exactly where that is. And not, again, it's limited because of his camera, but still a neat photo. So in 1917, he's there and gets the grandstands with the decorations, the flags, and kind of the back behind the scenes view here. This is great of the Ferris wheel and a couple people walking along. And I left in his little note because it's one of the few notes that he actually scratched on the negative. So we get his Ferris wheel, and then September 25th, 1915, apostrophe 15. And then he has a number that's backwards written on the other side, I guess. But so really cool, early Ferris wheel at the fair. Demolition derby. Ever since they had cars, it's like, let's run them into each other, right? And then this happens, and it's a great shot for him. get the grandstand and all the people, and this great view. Nice. Put that thing upright, get back in there. And he loved motorcycles, so I'm sure he just had a lot of fun taking these pictures. And he gets himself and probably his buddy standing there in the shadow. So he gets the self-portrait with his favorite motorized transport right there, zooming by. And there's another one. Really cool to watch. And so then he gets around to the other side and gets this wonderful view back toward Mount Helena, and just fabulous, great stuff. So that's the fun of the fairgrounds. So now there's a lot of street scenes, of course. It's one of the just most obvious things that a photographer is going to want to take pictures of, and we love them because they really capture the life of the city and that kind of that sense of place over time that you see. So they really give us a view of Helena from this period, 1916, 17, 18. This first view is the only one from the 1920s that I included. Just wanted to put it in there to kind of give you a sense. By the 1920s, he has a better camera, and it's a nice, crisp, full view. It's a very good street scene. He's going to take a lot more of them through the 30s and 40s and 50s. But I wanted to have them there just kind of give you an idea of what it would have looked like for him to take a street scene in the 20s before we look at these. So again, they're limited by his lens, the camera that he has. He tends to take a lot of these in portrait, rather than landscape. And probably because of the street and maybe his perception at the time of wanting to, I don't know, maybe the building's framing it better that way. I'm not sure, but I always like to get and I think his later street scenes are often in a landscape because it's just, you catch wider, you get more of the buildings, and maybe those businesses want to be in those photographs. So, but this time, so with a lot of these that are taken in portrait, I threw in a cropped version so we can kind of get a better sense for the details that we can see in these portrait photographs of the streets. Really great details of just daily life on the downtown streets of Helena. And this whole group here is going to be Main Street, kind of the heart of town. See the tracks from the electric trains running through Main Street, and some vehicles, early cars, and a lot of pedestrians, and some nice street lamps. And there's one of the streetcars coming down the street. This is more of South Main Street, with two-story buildings generally, 2 to 3. I think occasional 4-story, but smaller buildings down at South Main. And it has that gritty, the camera that he's using, it kind of gives it the gritty feel that you probably would get on Helena's Main Street at that time. And so that is, I think that's South Main again, probably south of Broadway, I believe. So looking toward the end of South Main before it kind of jogs over and heads up to the gulches there, the Grizzly Gulch and so on. A lot of awnings decorated for the 4th from one of these great vantage points. There's the Placers there on the right, beyond the Klein and Company sign. Was it Gans and Klein sign? This is sometime around, this might have been when we have other photographs of the troops marching up Main Street. This might have been that time. I'm not sure. It might have just been a 4th of July, but it could be 1917, the first, 4th of July, or maybe they were sending off troops if it wasn't the 4th, but it's likely that time period, 17, 18. This is a nice one with the moving streetcar, and that's right about at Edwards Street there. So the theater is just off to the left off of Main. So this is all just north of Broadway, looking toward 6th Avenue in the distance. And there's a little closer scene, yeah, right there. Those taller buildings on the left, which are lost in the 1920s to fire. and another building there. I guess the immediate left was lost, I think, in the 1940s to fire. So this part of downtown has changed a lot from this time. So that is looking at, there's the power block on the left. So this is 6th and Main, and the Sandin and Ferguson store, the corner there, right in the middle. There's an arcade sign. There's a little bit better view of the details. So it's a nice view. This is on South Main, and I think it's a parade. You can see the placer in the distance, but it's neat. And I zoomed in a little bit here, cropped it. Look on the left, there's somebody, I think it's dressed as a police officer with a little pony leading the. So I think it's a parade. There's some kids on the right watching, and I'm not sure what's going on, but good scene though. So here's some winter on South Main Street. A bit better view there. That gritty scene it captures. Again, so getting off Main Street, I threw in a few more, not Main Street views for us to see. This is actually Lyndale. So right about, Centennial Park would be on the right nowadays. I see Carroll College on the right. Freshly planted trees, probably within, 5+ years or so. Then George's house would be just up ahead there on the right of the street. So this is Benton Avenue, probably just south of Lyndale. There's nothing there. No houses there built yet. Civic Center is not there, which would be visible kind of in the middle distance, but there's Mount Ascension and downtown there on the left in the distance. So really gets a nice idea, or just a great view to see what that was like before the homes were built there eventually. This is over on Harrison. This is one of two that he took. And I believe actually his mother's house would be one of those. I think it's one of those 4 that are there. So he takes this, and then he takes this, which is a little bit better, with those same houses a little further up. He steps a little bit further up the road, and he gets a better composition in this photo, and gets Mount Helena clearly visible, and captures Harrison when it's like half developed. And it's a lot of fun to kind of look at these and then kind of drop into Google Maps and kind of see what's there now, when you can obviously see when newer houses were built and they're not in these photos. So really helps us to have these views of these other streets that we wouldn't normally get photographs of, because he was just there taking them, and then he saved his photos. And not a lot of photos like his taken when he was a teenager were saved. So it's great to have these. This is just a great view of Lawrence. The negative is it didn't turn out that great, so I really had to use Photoshop to try to get the image to come through better. But it's a wonderful one to have, and I think that's the building there in the middle. Is that the YMCA building? Okay, thanks, Becca. Yeah, I was looking at it going, I think that's the YMCA. I wasn't sure, but so that building's not there anymore. It's a big building, and that building just on the left, you see the edge of. I'm not sure what that is, but it's not there anymore either. Probably, yeah. Yeah, so really great to see this one, and then to get it to more visible with Photoshop. Thankfully, I think we see the iron front there on the left too in the distance. So going over to kind of coming in for a landing here, over to Grand Street. This is the Placer on the left, and First National Bank there, kind of the back of it. So Jackson and Grand. So nowadays Grand isn't really a street; it's just a little walking path. And Jorud, actually, this is where he worked. so he's just behind him is Lyle, the Lyle studio, Leslie Lyle studio. So I'll show you that in a minute. But so another view he took just down Jackson, looking at the Masonic Temple, those buildings there, looking toward Grand Street. Interesting view. And so we'll end here back at his headquarters at Lyle Studio, and that's probably his bike, I'm guessing. I mean, it's got to be, right? And that's the end of our talk. I hope you'll look for more Capitol views coming in the series. I'm going to try to work my way through Jorud's life, through 20s, 30s, and beyond. And as we see Les get up in an airplane and start taking pictures, which is coming up, I guess, in the 20s. So did that pretty early and repeatedly. So there'll be a lot more coming. I'm just trying to get more of George's photos out there. But this has been it's a neat one to just look at and think about how this kid who born and raised in Helena started taking pictures when he was a teenager and never stopped. So I hope you enjoyed it.